After recent meetings with Putin and Zelensky, Trump has finally come up with a plan to stop the largest armed conflict in Europe since World War II. The plan, being called Trump's 28-point peace plan, consists of 28 key provisions aimed at bringing an end to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. One of the most important features or requirements is that Ukraine formally recognizes Russian control over Crimea, annexed in 2014, and significant portions of the Donbass, including Donetsk and Luhansk. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia will be frozen along the line of contact, meaning de facto recognition along that line, while Russia relinquishes other agreed territories it controls outside these 5 regions. This territorial arrangement forms the cornerstone of the proposal, requiring Ukraine to withdraw from the part of Donetsk Oblast it currently controls, which will become a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone internationally recognized as Russian territory. Russian forces will not enter this buffer zone. The rationale behind this concession is rooted in Trump's emphasis on negotiation over escalation. During his discussions with Putin, Trump reportedly stressed the economic burdens of the war on Russia, including sanctions that have hampered its energy exports and isolated it from international markets. In exchange for territorial recognition, Russia would commit to withdrawing troops from remaining Ukrainian-held positions outside the agreed regions, establishing a demilitarized zone monitored by international observers. Zelensky, meeting Trump in Washington in February 2025, expressed reservations, but acknowledged the exhaustion of Ukrainian forces and the dwindling Western aid, which has shifted priorities under the new U.S. administration. The plan envisions a phased implementation, starting with an immediate ceasefire once both sides retreat to agreed points, after which borders are finalized through mediated talks, potentially involving the United Nations or a neutral third party like Turkey. Beyond territory, the 28-point framework addresses military and security arrangements to prevent future hostilities. Ukraine would be obligated to reduce its armed forces to 600,000 personnel, down from 800,000 to 850,000 currently, and enshrine in its constitution that it will not join NATO. NATO, in turn, will amend its statutes to ensure Ukraine is never admitted, and NATO troops will not be stationed in Ukraine. In return, the United States would provide explicit security guarantees for Ukraine, conditional on compliance with the deal. These guarantees would be invalid if Ukraine attacked Russia without cause, but would trigger decisive, coordinated military responses and sanctions if Russia violated the deal. Economic reconstruction features prominently in the plan, with provisions for a powerful global package to rebuild Ukraine. This includes the creation of a Ukraine Development Fund, investing in fast-growing industries such as technology, data centers, and artificial intelligence. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine to modernize and operate its gas infrastructure, while $100 billion in frozen Russian assets will be invested in U.S.-led efforts to rebuild Ukraine, with the U.S. receiving 50% of the profits. Europe will add another $100 billion, and frozen European funds will be unfrozen. Ukraine will also be eligible for EU membership and receive short-term preferential access to the European market while the issue is considered. Russia, on its part, would benefit from reintegration into the global economy, with sanctions lifted gradually and on a case-by-case basis. It would be invited to rejoin the G8, and the United States and Russia would enter into long-term economic cooperation agreements in energy, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and rare earth projects. Humanitarian elements are also included, such as the repatriation of prisoners of war, the return of civilian detainees and hostages, and the establishment of family reunification programs. Over 2 million Ukrainians who fled to Europe could return under guaranteed protections, with international aid facilitating housing and job programs. European leaders, particularly from Poland and the Baltic states, have voiced strong opposition, fearing it emboldens Russia to pursue further expansions. Zelensky's government has indicated willingness to negotiate, but insists on referendums in affected regions, a demand unlikely to be met given Russian control. Domestically in Ukraine, public sentiment remains divided. Polls from mid-2025 show 60% opposing territorial concessions, yet war fatigue has grown amid blackouts and economic hardship. In Russia, the plan aligns with Putin's narrative of victory, potentially strengthening his position amid internal pressures from military losses. Trump's strategy draws from his deal-making background, positioning the United States as a mediator rather than a direct supporter. By prioritizing rapid resolution, the plan seeks to redirect American focus to domestic issues and competition with China. Implementation challenges abound, including verification of troop withdrawals and enforcement of arms limits. If successful, it could end a conflict that has claimed over 500,000 lives and displaced millions, reshaping Eastern Europe's geopolitical landscape. However, failure risks renewed escalation, underscoring the fragility of peace built on compromise. As negotiations progress, the world watches whether Ukraine's sovereignty can coexist with Russia's demands.